Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Baffoe. In this podcast, I speak to Africans from across a multitude of sectors, including business, art, culture, media, design, technology, advertising, and everything in between, delving into their journeys and reflecting on the lessons they have learned along the way. It's about gaining insight into why and how they do what they do. These conversations offer a treasure trove of takeaways on a wide range of topics, including craft, relationships, wellness, parenting, entrepreneurship, and much more. My guest today is Farah C. Fortune, Managing Director and founder of African Star Communications, a corporate and celebrity PR agency. She's the driving force behind the Pad Run, which is an NPO committed to eradicating period poverty, and co-author of a book, TD Talks, Periods.
Yes.
Well, colon or semicolon?
Semicolon.
Look at me, the writer, asking you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You grew up in Cape Town, right?
Yes, I did. I was born there. I was born in Cape Town. And then I grew up there for a little bit. And then from there, we moved to Belgium. Then from Belgium, we moved to England. And that's why it's part of my
Okay, wait. So I think I missed that whole Belgium. So you're born in Cape Town.
Yes.
How did you end up in Belgium?
Okay, so I lived in Cape Town till the age of 6. And then both my parents are from Kimberley. So from the age of 6 till 10, we moved to Kimberley. And then at 10 years old, we moved to Belgium because my dad worked there. So he was like, my dad always worked either overseas or in Botswana or in some other African country. So I didn't really grow up with my dad a lot when I was younger. He was always working away from home. And then when we were about 10 years old, I think my mom just got fed up with my dad just never being home. And there's 6 of us. And she was pregnant with the 6th at the time. And then my dad was like, okay, everybody's moving to Belgium. So that's how we ended up moving to Belgium.
So you moved 6.
We moved 5 of us and 1 in the belly of my mom's belly. And we all moved to Belgium. It was very interesting. It was such a different life. Coming from apartheid South Africa, at that time we were still deep within apartheid. And I mean, the first day we got to Belgium, my dad took us out on the street. I always tell the story because I will never forget the story. I'm 10 years old. I've never seen people of color mix with each other. I've never seen black people talk to white people in the way that it's social. I've never seen colored people have interactions with white people. Like, it was very segregated. We grew up like that. And I remember the first day we got there and we went out. And we were walking in the street and there was a white woman kissing a black man. And I grabbed my dad so fast and said, oh, you need to tell them to stop. They're going to get into trouble. And then my parents had to explain that apartheid was only here. And that was like, blew my mind as a 10-year-old. Like, oh, okay. So it's only here. And I really didn't understand that concept for a very long time. But growing up in Belgium really opened my eyes up to so much of the world and how different we were as South Africans. At the time, we moved in 1990. I remember in 94 when Mandela was released. I remember my parents, like, we were all standing in front of the TV, like not even sitting, everyone's standing around the TV, watching him walk out of prison. And my parents are holding hands and they're crying. And I think even at that age, the gravity of what was happening, only really hit me when I started coming back home and going back and forth and seeing the changes. I was now seeing black people driving very nice cars and Mercs and BMWs and the lifestyle that changed and how much black and colored people flourished, and Indian people also in that time. So it was very much blew my mind moving to another country at such a young age. And I realized then that, even when I had my daughter, how important it was to just show her the world and how many other opportunities there were out there.
I mean, so like I said, I didn't know about that portion.
Yes.
But it explains a lot in terms of what I know of you.
Okay.
Like it's like one of those penny drop moments. Like, okay, you were exposed to the broader world. You're exposed to a different perspective, a different lens. And then the UK, what family then moved from Belgium to
just
UK?
My dad's just business with my dad. We ended up moving to Manchester, and that's pretty much where I grew up most of my life. Manchester was, such a big cultural shock for me because we also lived in I went to school and became friends with a lot of Sikh and Hindu friends. And then that was another cultural shock to me because now I'm Muslim. I'm, in this. There's a place in Manchester called Wilmslow Road. If you know Manchester, you know this place. I don't know another road that I could honestly describe it as, but it is literally, it's called the Curry Mile. The nickname is the Curry Mile.
I've actually been there
once
in my life.
Okay. So that entire road is just basically Indian takeaways, Indian jewelry shops, anybody in the Indian community, Muslim community, and they have some sort of business, it's on that road in Manchester. And I grew up with friends, and that's where we went, and that's where we seen life, and it was such a cultural shock for me because being a Muslim South African is very different to being a Muslim British person. And that was it was interesting, but I loved it. I loved England. It was very different. Although at the time, I don't know what it's like now. Although at the time, the South African schooling system then was so much more advanced than what it was there. So when we moved to Belgium, I finished school when I was 14 because we were so advanced here. I matriculated at 14. I went to college at 14. So at that time, like I said, I don't know what it's like now, but I was pushed forward so much because we were so advanced in terms of education at the time. So yeah, I was also 14 years old hanging around with 18-year-olds thinking I'm Ochat,
Well, you ended up in Manchester, but still ended up supporting the right football team. So that's all right.
No, I support Liverpool before you. Oh, okay. I just thought, okay,
because
yes.
I support Liverpool. And I know you support Liverpool.
I was like,
so when
no,
you went
Manchester.
when you went Manchester, I was like, but at least I know that they didn't influence you to the point where you.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed being in Manchester when the games were on because the roads were you could murder someone in Manchester on those roads because the cops are watching football. Everybody is watching football. You can go shopping in peace. I really enjoyed that. But I don't know why. I think it was just friends and I got into football and really learned so much about it. And Liverpool was just the team that I was drawn into. And then I was ostracized by the family because obviously we're colored and from Cape Town. Who are we going to support? Manchester United. So I was the only Liverpool supporter. And, I got my daughter into being a Liverpool supporter. And now she's a Manchester United supporter. So she failed me in life there.
Yeah, well, she failed you or you failed us.
No. She had the tea, she had a new kit, all the time she had everything. I think, again, school can influence you. So that was me. But yes, I ended up with the right team, definitely.
So if I'd met you, one of my favorite questions, but if I'd met you in Manchester now, so you've been from South Africa, Belgium, you're now in Manchester.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would your answer have been?
At the time, a lawyer, because I actually did study law and never did anything with it, and never finished my last year of law school. But that was where my aim was. I realized, though, I had a big moral conflict with having to defend anyone that I knew was innocent, and especially if it was someone like a rapist or abuser. And I really fought with that for a long time, and I think that's why I literally gave up, because I didn't know if I had the capacity to do that. And I loved working with people, and I sort of fell into PR more than anything else. I studied it, but it was really something I went to look at, what would I enjoy that wouldn't necessarily require me to sit behind a desk. However, I did work for immigration in England. So I used to issue national insurance numbers. So I would work with immigration to ensure that you could work in the UK. And yes, I put a lot of people in prison, funnily enough, 12 Pakistani guys for having fake South African passports. And the reason I caught them was because they said they were from South Africa and they would be here and they're born all their lives. And I was like, what language do you speak? And it's like, no, we speak Afrikaans and English. So I spoke Afrikaans to them. I couldn't speak a word of Afrikaans. Anyway, ended up sending the cops to the house. They found out they had all these illegal passports. And through that, I did very well in that job. And through that,
What's interesting, I mean, you just said law.
Yes.
Your issue with law
Yes.
was this,
But
what's
then
it?
you say
moral,
it's different.
moral quandary. And
Yes,
then
but
the
that's
other side
like-
is like, you guys.
Yeah, no, I was like, no, you play with my country now.
Straight to the
You
cell.
can't. But from that, I did so well that I was actually approached by MI6. And I was approached, obviously you don't start deep in the spiral there. You have to go into admin and you have to go through all these tests and everything else. And I went through, and then I came home to South Africa on a holiday. And I met my daughter's father. You see men what they do. Hey.
You've just taken away all agency that you had.
I know.
You're like,
I was so good.
For what I know of you,
I was
and then
so
you come,
good.
you say,
I
I
lost
came
it.
back, and then
Yeah,
you see
and then
men.
you see,
then you blame.
I fell in love, and that was my fault. But yeah, I the product of that love was beautiful. But yeah, I came home, ended up falling in love, ended up moving back, getting engaged, getting married, and having a child.
How old were you?
I was too young to be doing all that stuff. I think I was 25 when I got married, and I had Layla when I was about 26.
And the
so,
parents? What did the...
My parents were, I mean, firstly, you need to understand, I also grew up telling my entire family I'm never having children. I never wanted children. Like, I was like, I don't want children. I'm not doing all of this stuff. I want to be a career woman. And then my parents were very shocked when I actually wanted to get married in the first place. And they even asked my ex-husband, like, are you sure? Like, do you know this girl for real? Because they knew me. And yeah, I mean, it was also so out of character for me. But I guess, it's always that you live and you learn. I don't regret anything. But my life took a totally different trajectory. I ended up leaving my application. They ended up contacting me saying, hey, we want to take you through to the next, because I'd already done all these tests. So maybe, hey, who I would have been a girl version of James Bond by now. But I mean, eventually, the things with that job and what enticed me to it was, they were very, very vocal about the fact that, hey, you can never get married, you can't have kids, depending on how deep you go into the agency and things like that. So, I was fine with that. So also just getting married, and after having told my parents, listen, this is the career path I want to go, and then getting married and falling pregnant and all of those things, I was just like, even my brother, I remember my brother walking into the room and saying, and then what happened? So my life was very different in my early 20s. I just didn't feel that particular route was right for me, and then I ended up doing it. So yeah.
What was early marriage like? Like you're saying, kind of you've been very clear and you've been very deliberate up to a point.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you do something that for you is, say, out of character.
Yeah.
And you go and you get married. And 6 months into it, you wake up one day and you're like, oh wait, I have a husband.
Yeah.
And then you fell pregnant, let's say, relatively quickly.
Yes.
I'll be bold and say
Very
you fell
relative,
pregnant
yeah.
relatively quickly.
Within
Which also
Yeah.
means that you haven't had, like, that first year of marriage tends to be, I believe, and that first year of marriage is, you could have been living together, you could have been together for ages, but it's a different kind of finding a rhythm. And then when you add a baby,
Yeah.
that's another disruption to rhythm. So what was that moment like? Like when you wake up one day and you're like, okay, I was talking to this, I was sending people to prison.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden I'm a
It's
wife,
different-
I'm a mother.
It's, it was very different for me. Also, I mean, I got my first job at 13. And I got my first job at 13 because my sister was, I have two older sisters, and my eldest sister there's quite an age gap between us. And she was actually working at HR at the time in this hotel. And in England, you could work from the age of 16. So she lied and said, no, I'm 16. At that time, I didn't really check. I mean, we're going years and years back. And I was 13. And my first job was cleaning hotel rooms and cleaning the toilets in reception. So that's what I did at 13. And it was great. I loved it because I had my own money. And I got the sense of independence from having my own money from a very early age. And when I got married to somebody who was doing well for himself. And I was working at his company at the time, even when we got married. And when I gave birth, all of that stopped, and now I became this housewife. And in that time, he became extremely wealthy. So I have now gone from being a wife to being a mom to being a housewife to a man who has also just become extremely wealthy. And what comes with men who usually aren't in that position and become extremely wealthy? What follows money? Woman.
Because I was going to say, I don't know, because I'm not extremely wealthy. I'm still waiting for my moment.
Your moment's coming, don't worry. And that was tough for both of us. I think just because we were young, I wouldn't say we rushed into our marriage, but I definitely think that we didn't realize what it was for both of us. I won't blame him completely. I was also in the marriage, and it was tough. It was really tough. It was tough because I felt like I had given up this whole life for him, and that was it took me a long time to understand that was my decision to make. He didn't force me to do it, and I blamed him a lot for that, which wasn't his fault. And I had to accept that I had made a decision that was a bad decision for me at the time. But it was also hard to, you've given birth. Your body is not the same. Your hormones are not the same. You're trying to be the person you were before you became a mom, and that's not possible. And I struggled with that for such a long time, and that affected our marriage. It also affected our marriage that he was now in this position where a young man should be without a wife, where he should experience life like that without a wife first, and then bring someone into that kind of lifestyle when they are ready to settle down. We both did things backwards. And I think, we have a beautiful child out of it. She is amazing and such a lovable 19-year-old now who drives me crazy, but I could not imagine my life without her. And in January, we had an incident where we almost lost her, and that for me, that still is so much. But when I look at everything that came from that marriage. And also, he's a great businessman. I will never take that away from him. He taught me so much about business in that short time we were married. And I took that into my own business. So there's a lot of good that came out of it. But also there's a lot of things that I think if you're not prepared for as a young person, it can really carry trauma into the rest of your life if you don't deal with it. And I didn't deal with it for a long time. And I think that affected other relationships of mine. And also just until I realized my fault in the marriage, I did blame him, unfortunately, for a lot of things.
A friend of mine once said to me years ago, and he lost his first wife and then remarried. It's like, we all have baggage.
Yeah.
That's the reality. It's just finding the person whose baggage you can deal with.
Yeah.
And who can deal with your baggage.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's nothing perfect, and you learn as you go, and it evolves, and it evolves, and it changes with circumstance, with moments. What is that moment like when you decide that, okay, this is not working?
Yeah.
This must end.
He's the one that walked out of the marriage. I wanted to at least try and make it work because I kind of felt, at that time, my parents had been married for a very long time. My parents only got divorced after 47 years of marriage. And at that time, I kind of felt like a failure. And he walked out of the marriage. And for me, that was really tough because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I was like, everything I know is in England. I grew up there, all my friends were there, my job opportunities. I had gone to uni there, schooling, everything I knew was over there. So I was really scared. And that was such a scary time for me because I only had a few friends here at the time, because what I did do when my daughter was about 8 months old, I was like, I can't sit at home anymore. I can't do this. And there was already cracks starting to show in the marriage then. And that's when I went out and I found myself a job. And he was upset with me for doing that because, he was the provider, and he was like, well, why are you working? And then one day I come home and I'd bought my own car, and then he was like, well, why didn't you tell me? I would have helped you, and all those things, because I was fighting the independence and the wife. They were fighting each other. And I knew at some point, because of the way our marriage was going, that the independence had to win out, because at some point I knew I was going to have to take care of my daughter and I. And that was, something that was really tough for me, especially at 25. When at that point, my parents had a very healthy marriage. They were, or what I thought was a healthy marriage. And, you see that, and, your grandparents, they didn't divorce, and they only separated because they died, and, things like that. And you feel like a failure. You feel like a failure. At that time, also, like 20 years ago, you need to understand marriage was the be all and end all of life. Now girls are saying, I don't need to get married, and good for them. If they don't want to, marriage is not the be all and end all. But it wasn't like that when I was younger. So I did feel like a failure. I did feel like I'd messed up. I felt like I let my daughter down. And it's tough. I mean, sometimes I even still feel like that now, not in terms of being a failure, but I just, like, you feel like, what would my daughter's life have been like if, she did have this, 2.4 children family kind of thing. Because I look at my brother. My brother's been married now, I think 17 or 18 years. He's got 2 daughters. I have the most amazing sister-in-law. And, you look at that and you're like, he did it. He did it. He's still doing it every day. And then you look at yourself and you're like, what am I doing wrong? Was I being stubborn? And that's why I say sometimes I wonder what it would have been like for her. Would it have been any different? But then I also look at her and her dad's personalities, and I think, if anything, they would have killed each other, not me. Because they're so alike.
Fathers and daughters.
Fathers and daughters.
There's something there. But also, I mean, it's so for me, what you're talking about is one of those kind of continuous and semi-hard lessons.
Yeah.
There was a time when I used to imagine what life would look like with certain things in place that weren't there. And then it's very easy to get so caught up in that.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, then you attach your value.
Yeah, you do.
For yourself.
Yeah.
Not even the outside world, like internally, you start lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And my most profound realization was because I used to imagine what my life would have been like if my mother had lived. My mother died when I was 14 months.
Okay.
In a car accident. So I lived my whole life without my mother. And then there was a moment when I was like, if that had changed, I'm not guaranteed that life would have been perfect today. All I have to work with is the life that I've lived. And, I think I'm all right. I'm a decent enough person. I've built a decent enough life with all its issues that I know. That's tangible for me.
Yeah.
And I describe it as a moment, but it was more like a internal process.
Yeah.
Of getting to the point where it's like, it is what it is. That's kind of how life has unfolded. And I'm not going to sit and go, but if there was this or if there was that, because that becomes another burden to carry. And I have less energy for those kind of burdens.
It is. It's tough. I mean, even when we got divorced, I mean, at the time we got divorced, I was working as a publicist for Ster-Kinekor. And so I was just getting into the industry. I was starting to meet people. I was just understanding who everyone was, the hierarchies of this and that. And when he walked out of the marriage, he was having an affair. And the girl he was having an affair with was an actress, and I was working on her movie at the time. And that was really tough for me, because no matter what, when the premiere was on, I was there. And I mean, this is a man who said to me, who never came to anything I worked on. And then I don't think he put two and two together. And she turns up at the premiere with my husband. And I look at him and I can't cry. I'm at work. I need to get things done. And I did. And I realized at that moment that if I'm going to do or be anything in life, I need to know how to handle my emotions in public. And I also need to know how to handle myself and the trauma that I'm dealing with right now. And that was tough for me. That was really tough for me. It was really hard. I mean, I've actually never told anyone that story. And, looking back at it now, I'm just like, I mean, she eventually admitted to me that she knew it was my husband. And at the end of the day, I can never blame her, and I never do blame her, because she didn't make vows to me. He did. So it's not her fault. No matter what he said to her, no matter what happened, it's not her fault. And I never blame her. But it was tough at the time.
And I can imagine that, like you're talking about the separation. So being able to compartmentalize and kind of go, I'm at work now.
Yes.
But the problem is, and a lot of us do that, is we learn how to compartmentalize, but then there's this stuff, there's the lingering stuff that we actually don't deal with.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, what you're talking about is the importance of being able to compartmentalize in this moment, but also recognizing that if you don't deal with that stuff, it's going to linger and it's going to manifest in different ways.
Of course. I mean, I'll give you one thing though. Out of that entire situation, I think the one thing it did teach me is that money doesn't have emotions. And that's the one thing I've really held onto in my business. Like, in terms of getting upset about people not paying you or this or that, or I've just never, emotions and money, I just don't put together. It's the one thing I think from that one day, it ingrained in me. And like I said, he taught me lessons that I carried through to my business. And I think that was one of them. So in that sense, it's like you say, you do compartmentalize, and it can be a problem if you don't deal with a lot of things. And also, just being a single mom, there's so many things that you just have to get through. Like, listen, I need to pay these things. I don't have the money for these things, but I need to figure it out. Literally still, even now, my daughter still says to me, like, my motto is, it's fine. I'll figure it out. It'll work out. That's literally, she always says that to me. Don't worry, mommy. It's gonna figure it out. It'll work out. And in a way, it makes me sad that I have a child that also thinks like that. But I'm also glad that we put her into therapy from, I think she's been in therapy from the age of 16 or 17. And it's been a good thing, because I wish even at that age, even if I didn't need it, my parents had just done it for me. Because, there's a lot of stuff you just can't say to your parents. And
but it's also a different time. I mean, you're growing up in the UK. True. I grew up in Maseru, where there were I don't know of any therapists in the entire country when I was growing up. And when I discovered that there was, and this is as somebody who traveled a lot as a child and was quite exposed to different cultures, even within Maseru. But the only reason I knew that there was a career called psychology was because my then high school girlfriend, and we were together for, through high school, and then after high school, she wanted to be a psychologist.
Oh, okay.
And she could just read me like a book. So I'm like...
So she knew her career.
So that's why, but knowing kind of, okay, there's something called a psychologist, something called a therapist.
Yeah.
You can go and talk to. It wasn't...
it wasn't back in our day. It wasn't.
I became
things.
A teenager in the 80s, so it was probably even worse. And then in a small country like Lesotho, where the facilities aren't there. And even now, I mean, I first started therapy at 50, 51.
Never too late.
And I did it for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Now I think I'm on a break.
Okay.
But yeah, just knowing that it's there and it's available. And a good friend of mine always says, with our kids, I always say it's great that they have so much support. And mental health is a conversation.
Yeah.
It's something that's on the table. It's out there. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just, okay, this is something that we
need to deal with.
We need to deal with. But my friend always says, listen, it doesn't matter what we do. Our kids are always going to end up in therapy anyway.
Yeah, I
Like-
really, it
like
doesn't matter.
good, bad, you could be
Doesn't matter.
the best you could be, but they're all
And
eventually going to
I
end up
think
in
for her,
therapy.
it's just good. I mean, regardless of whatever it is, whether it's me, whether it's a dad or about her friends or just anything in her life, I think it's just good that she goes to therapy and she understands that, if you need that support, it's there for you. You don't have to struggle by yourself. And I think a lot of the problem with, with us, just millennials generally, is the fact that therapy was so frowned upon when we were young. And if you needed therapy, you were crazy. That was the final conclusion on anything when, if you look back into the 1920s and 30s and 40s, they were giving people lobotomies because they didn't know how else to deal with them. And, now obviously we've advanced and it's great. And I really just think generally kids should just go to therapy because kids are always going to think you're the problem. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how good of a parent you think you are. They're always going to know better. They're always going to think they know better. And just to give them that outlet to speak to someone that isn't you, I think is really good. If you are in a position to do it, send your kids to therapy. And there's a lot of free therapy programs out there as well. But yeah, I think it really helped. I wish I had known that as, a lot quicker, even when I got divorced, of how much help I needed at the time and should have gotten at the time. And it would have probably helped me a lot more later on in my life.
I'm Gen X, so my line is just be strong.
Yeah.
Just be strong.
You're love from a different world.
Dust yourself up, get up. Let's keep it
Let's
moving.
keep it going.
When did you start your business? So, you're going through a divorce. At least you've been working, you have some kind of foundation. But now you're a single mother who never wanted to be a mother to begin with. And then you start a company at some stage.
Yeah. I got quite deep into the industry. I was like, if I'm going to understand this industry, I need to do everything. I used to sneak into parties, into events, used to beg people to be their plus ones. I did everything I could to understand the industry I was working in and how it worked. And at the time, there was literally, I think, 3 publicists who did celebrity PR at the time. And, I think 2 of them were white men and the other one is a white lady. There were no people of color doing celebrity PR when I started. And that was like, oh, okay, maybe this is my into this industry. And I was working for a PR company at the time. I was earning 12,000 Rand a month. And I was getting by, 12,000 Rand back in 2008, you could live.
It was decent.
It was decent. But I wanted more. And I have a thing for luxury shoes. So I just knew that 12,000 Rand was never going to do anything for me if I wanted to maintain this shoe habit of mine. Just to know that I still work for shoes. I have a whole room at home that is just a shoe room. So yeah, you have to have a goal in life. That's mine. I was like, I need to do more. I wanted to be a decision maker in the industry. And I knew in order to do that, I was going to have to create a position for myself. And then I remember getting my last paycheck and I had registered African Star. And how I came up with the name was I had originally registered Fortunate Communications. And Cipro got back to me and said it was a phone shop in Durban. Couldn't take the name. I was like, okay. So I had to come back to them with 3 other names. And I remember reading this mail, closing my laptop, and going onto the internet. And that time, just like they have now, Google has like these little pictures or whatever. And it was, for some reason that day, I opened it and it was a lioness sitting on top of a rock. And it was the night sky at the back, and it was just one star. And I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful African star. And I was like, that's the name. That's where I got the name from. And I immediately emailed Cipro back, and I didn't even give them two other options. I said, I want African Star Communications. They got back to me that very day. Everything was registered. It was registered on the 20th of March, 2008. I packed up everything on my desk, wrote a resignation letter, and handed it in, and I walked out that very day. And I was like, when you're young, you just think, oh, I can do anything. Anything is possible. You have all the guts in the world. And I was like, I'm just gonna go have my own business. I'm gonna make my own money. And I went out there, and one of my first jobs was actually, funnily enough, a gig for Man United. I had gone to pitch. A friend of mine had a friend at AIG. AIG at the time were Man United sponsors. And they were like, oh, they're looking for a PR company to come in and just do a small sports day with one of their charities, whatever. So it's like, you can go and pitch. So 2 days later, I go with my little proposal, and I go, and like outside of this office, it's just men, because at the time PR was very, very male dominated. It was just men that worked in PR. And I'm sitting there and I'm like waiting for my turn to go in and pitch. And there were about 4 guys who had gone in before me, and there were, I think, another 3 that were after me, all white males, all of them. I walked into this office, and he's like, hi, blah, 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 blah. I do my pitch, and he was like, I love it. You've got the job. And I sat there and I was like, excuse me? And he's like, no, you've got the job. It's fine. I'll tell the other guys they can go. Walks out. He tells them they can go. He's like, okay, this is what we want. This is the date, blah, 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 blah. And I walked out of there, and I made 12,000 Rand on that job. That was just basically covering my salary for the next month, because it was literally like a week later I had to throw this thing together. And it was for Manchester United, and we did it at the Palazzo Hotel at Monte Casino. I'll never forget. And that was my first job. And then I didn't get any more work for 3 months. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle putting on a face every day to go out there and pitch for work. I didn't have petrol in the car. I used to live in Blairgowrie at the time. So I would literally put on my shoes and walk to Sandton, get there, make sure I had a Vaslap in the bag so that when I get there early, I can just go and wipe myself down from the sweat, because I know I'm going to have to walk back because I don't have money to go home either. And that time we didn't have Uber. You still had to call a taxi and wait 20 minutes or whatever. And a taxi, I think at that time from my house to Sandton, I think was something like 35 Rand. 35 Rand I didn't have. And that was what I did for a couple of months. And eventually it just started taking off slowly, one by one. The jobs started coming in, and it was such pure determination and a lot of manifestation that I still thoroughly believe in today. And that's really how African Star started and how it took off. But it was tough because, I remember just making meals. We had a helper. That helper is still with me today. She's been with us since Layla was 8 months old. My daughter's almost 20. And my ex-husband would pay her, right? And she would take that money and help buy us food so that we had food in the house. Because she had worked for us when I was still married, and she came with me when we got divorced. And she would help us buy food. When I, couldn't make it, I would borrow money from my parents just to keep us afloat. Just so many things in the first few months that I wasn't making money. And yeah, it's running a business is really tough, especially getting off the ground. But I think also when you're so determined to see something happen and there's nothing that you can see that will make it fail, you get it off the ground and it works. It's tough. You have lots of bad days still. Nothing runs smoothly forever. But eventually it started working. And that was that was nice to go from, you know, having to eat noodles every night to make sure that she at least had food, or not eating just so she could have something to eat. That was a tough time in my life. But I mean, like everything else, you get through it.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. We delve into their journeys, the decisions they have taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the spirit takes us. Now let's get back into the conversation. I need to remember to do this. I'm speaking to Farah Fortune. She's MD and founder of African Star Communications. What's the C for, actually?
Shireen.
We'll get back into what's the C?
My name is actually Farah Shireen. I just use Farah. But my middle name, you would say, is Shireen. Yeah.
That's all right. I mean, so Kojo is actually my middle name.
What's your first name?
Frank.
No.
Frank.
But
Jr.
you look like a Frank.
I'm
though.
Frank Jr.
You look like a Frank.
What does a Frank look
like?
like?
The name's,
I'm named
like
after my father.
Like some people don't suit their names, but a Frank suits you. Like it suits you. I prefer the Kojo, but the Frank suits you.
So whenever I get phone calls from institutions,
Yeah.
if somebody phones and asks to speak to Frank Baffoe, then I know that it's usually an institution.
Yeah.
Either I owe them money, or there's something adult and responsible that I'm supposed to
deal with. Okay. I'm gonna call you Frank now.
I mean, with African Star, when I started kind of noticing what you're doing, is you built kind of like a significant network of, particularly within the celebrity space. So when you're talking about, you know, trying to be people's plus ones and kind of getting access to certain spaces, and to go from that to feeling like you're now the gatekeeper. So you're now the gatekeeper of the people that you were trying to get past.
Yeah.
We're trying to get past you now.
Yeah.
When do you kind of go, okay, this thing is actually going to work? This thing is, well, it's working.
When my electricity stopped being switched off. That's when I knew it was working. Because, listen, I went through many periods where I had to phone Eskom and be like, I'm going to pay tomorrow. I went through that for a long time. And I also was very stubborn. I mean, nothing's changed. But, I mean, I was very stubborn in terms of like having to ask people for help. I only realized very late on in my life that asking people for help is not going to turn me to dust. And that was, and also just, I think a lot of people, especially me at the time, my ego couldn't handle asking for help. But I realized when there was food on the table every night, when I could pay the DSTV every month, when I went out with my daughter and she asked for something and I could buy it. That for me, and that's why a lot of times people ask me, what's your definition of success? And nothing has changed for me. My definition of success is still, there's food in the fridge, the lights are on at home, my daughter has clothes on her back, nothing else.
And you can get shoes every now.
I can get shoes quite often. and that's my definition of success still. Nothing has changed for me because I still appreciate the fact that I can put clothes on her back. I still appreciate the fact that the electricity is still on. I still appreciate the fact that there's food in the fridge. Because I went through all of that and it was really tough. I mean, I at some point got kicked out of a house. I mean, my daughter wasn't even 3 yet. And we got kicked out of the house because I couldn't afford to pay the rent. Why? Because I was too stubborn to ask her dad to help me. And he didn't know. And only when we got kicked out and I was staying in my little Nissan Micra and we were sleeping in there, then I realized it's not about me. I can't have her here because I'm too proud to go and ask her dad for help. So I asked him for help and he helped me get back on my feet. He helped me pay rent, get a new place and pay the first month's rent and deposit. And I was very grateful for that. But yeah, like I said, it was really tough for me asking for help at that point. But that's why I say for me, success is those things. Because I still, even all these years later, I really appreciate that I'm able to do that. Yeah.
And then things like the pad run, because there's that and there's the struggles and the journey.
Yeah.
but then, and I realized over time how important it is to you.
Yeah.
Things like creating the pad run, things like the book. I came to the launch of the book where there were talks around, menstruation and periods and its impact on particularly our societies.
Yeah.
It's a concern for, a lot of people. We all have our causes, right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that our societies are struggling with, and we cannot fix all of them. And for a lot of us, you may express concern around it.
Yeah.
It may bother you. You may think about it. You may have conversations. You may donate something every now and then. You went the step further and went, okay, I'm actually going to do something about it.
I think I was part of the people who was always thinking about it and had never done anything about it, but just kept finding out things about it. And I think COVID is what really changed that. So I was always interested in the menstruation talk or lack of it because I'm Muslim. I come from a Muslim community, and menstruation is such a taboo subject in my community. And it used to frustrate the hell out of me because I would have a lot of Muslim friends and cousins who would have absolutely no idea how their bodies worked, but I did. Why? Because when I got my period, my mom was too shy to talk to me about my period. Who talked to me about my period? My dad. I remember getting my period, and I got my period. I was 11 years old. I got my period at school. I had these tummy cramps, and then I went to the bathroom and I seen blood on my panties, and I was so scared because no one had spoken to me about it. And I knew there was this thing, but I didn't know exactly what happened or how it was supposed to happen. And I remember going home that day and going straight to the bath to go wash it away because I thought if I washed it away, 5:30, I was in bed. My mom's like, what's wrong with you? I'm tired. I just want to go sleep. And I stayed in bed, and that whole night, the next morning I got up, it was still there. And I was like, oh my God, now I'm going to have to tell my mom about it. So I go to the bathroom, and it's still there. And then I just call my mom, and I'm like, and she walks in and she looks down and she closes the door and she walks away. 2 seconds later, my dad walks in, and my dad says to me, okay, this is a pad. Here's some panties. This is how it goes on. This is what you do. When you're done there, come out and let's talk. My dad sat me down, talked to me about my periods, coming to realize that my dad had had this conversation with all my sisters. And, and my mom came from such a closed, or such a, what's the word? A family where they just didn't talk about things like that. And my mom was so shy about it and didn't want to have that conversation with me. And my dad sat there and he told me about what is going to happen to my body now, and the fact that I'm going to grow hair on other parts of my body, and that I'm going to get breasts and all these things. And I started crying because I was like, I'm not ready for this. I don't want any of these things. And then also, when I needed my first bra, my dad took me, just like he did with my sisters, because he came from a family of 3 boys and 6 sisters. And in their house, they spoke about it. It was open. They didn't have problems with that kind of thing. And even then, when I got my period, my dad spoke to my brothers about it. And my brothers were so not, and even now, my brothers are so not shy to go and buy their wife's pads at the supermarket. Like, it was never a thing in our house, like, after that. Once I'd gotten my period, it was just never a thing for the boys to make us a hot water bottle, to, go buy us chocolate because we're not feeling well, we're on our period, or things like that. It was never a taboo subject in our house. And that's why it was so confusing for me when my friends didn't know what was going on with their bodies, or my cousins, or just in our communities. And just even talking about things like hymens that can break from horse riding, or from tampon usage, or from anything. It was just such an open conversation. And I when my daughter was 8, because, abuse can be so rampant if you don't pay attention to it. I made very sure from the age of 8, even up until now, my daughter and we just started having those conversations about her body and what would happen. And it wasn't just one conversation, it was a continuous conversation. I was like, I need you to know what's going on with your body. And I remember someone asking me, why would you have those conversations with your child? And I'm like, if somebody touches my daughter and she thinks that's okay and she keeps it a secret, I'm never going to be able to live with myself. So for me, it was so important to have those conversations with her and that she understood what a touch is, a good touch, and what a wrong touch is. So it was just something I'd always been so passionate about in my family, and I would be the one talking to my nieces or when they got their periods and things like that. Then during COVID, I had maybe more than 120 DMs of girls asking me for money for pads. Why? Because the NPOs and NGOs weren't running and they weren't going out there to hand out sanitary towels. And I realized what a problem this was. And it started off as just me asking people. It was my birthday. And I said to people, listen, it's my birthday. I would really love if you guys could just donate 10 Rand so that we can buy pads and I'll do a giveaway. We ended up raising 100,000 Rand off social media. And I took that money and I distributed it between Cape Town and Kimberley, where my family is from, and Johannesburg. And we bought pads. We bought 10,000 packs of pads. I got a distributor. I got a deal with them, and we went out and we just distributed in different areas. And what hit me the most was that a lot of the people that were coming up to us were about 10 to 13, 14-year-old girls who were pregnant. And I was like, you're pregnant. And they would come, and we made sure that everyone got a pack of pads, but the pregnant girls would get 2 packs and they would ask, why do we get 2? And in my head, I'm thinking, has no one told you that you're about to bleed for 6 weeks once this child is born? Like, no one had that conversation with them. And I realized how uneducated our communities, Black, Indian, and colored, are about menstruation. I also discovered that the 3rd leading cause of abuse in South Africa is menstruation. Why? Because husbands and boyfriends get upset that they cannot have sexual intercourse on the periods, not because you can't, but because you're in pain, you're bleeding. And for them, they're just like, you should be able to. So they get upset and then they end up abusing these women. So the 3rd leading cause of abuse is because of menstruation. And it really just blew my mind, all the things I was finding out. And I was like, I can't sit and make this a once-off cause. And with my best friend and my sister-in-law, we founded the Pad Run and we registered it. And so we basically survive on donations, and we go out to communities and we give out pads. But what we started doing was the flow workshops. And we go out, we give workshops to boys and girls to tell them what happens to a girl's body, what they should be doing, understanding, and also, we give them the sex talk because a lot of communities just don't want to have these conversations. Our workshops are also very big with boys-only workshops because boys tease girls. If they bleed through their school skirts, they don't help them. They don't understand. And I think the first workshop we did, KFC actually sponsored us, as well as a few other people. Kaiser Mataung, he came and he gave a talk as well about this cause and just about abuse. And I remember the first boys workshop we did, and we gave them a pad and we asked them, where do you think this goes? Oh, I wish I had that video with me now. They were sticking it on their inner thighs, and they were like, you just stick it on the thigh and then you walk with your legs together. That's how it's supposed to be. Like, this is the knowledge that is coming from our communities. And they would say, no, but don't girls just use it, just use that same pad, and then at night they take it off and then they put it back on. They thought they used the same sanitary towel every day throughout their period. And that for me was so mind-blowing. And I realized that this is not something that's a once-off thing. I mean, you noticed even when you came to our book launch for TD Talks, we had a workshop for the parents and we had a workshop for the kids, because parents need to understand how to have these conversations. So the pad run is very close to my heart. I'm actually working on right now, and looking for a sponsor. If anyone's out there and wants to get involved, let me know. We are actually working on doing the pad run walk and run. And we're going to have workshops, so you can bring your kids, and if they don't want to walk, they can go into the workshops and understand menstruation, how it works, the girls who are first-time menstruators. Just, also for the parents, we also want to do the walk just to also for you to understand how walking also just helps with period pains and just health in general from a young age. But it's really just something that we want to do as an annual event. So our first one we are hoping for is on the 31st of May. And I'm saying that because I want to speak it into existence so that you can hold me accountable for it, that I know that on the 31st of May this year, there needs to be a pad run and walk.
Absolutely. But I mean, and I ask about it because there's so much I've gained so much value from, and I haven't interacted with it a lot.
Yeah.
But I've gained so much from that because regardless of background, I grew up with two sisters.
Yeah.
And discovered that my father was having certain conversations with my sisters, that because we're three boys, that the boys we were clueless about. Like, I knew pads have an older sister, and I'd see them in the room.
Yeah.
But just kind of being able to talk it through, which in my family we've never done.
Yeah.
And now I have a daughter, and I remember when you sent that little package that you had sent, and kind of having a conversation and bringing my son, my daughter, my wife. I'm like, we're gonna have this conversation about menstruation. And realizing that my wife has her conversations with my daughter.
Yeah.
But one of the things was it was important for my son to be part of the conversation.
Oh, definitely.
And then I asked him, and he's like, yeah, I know what menstruation is. Like, this is what happens. And it was not a thing for him. Like, I thought I was having a whole, and this is like, what's it? Generation Z or whatever it is. And he's just like, yeah, no, I know about these things. It's like, okay, cool. And he's very nonchalant about it.
That means these kids are speaking about it, which is
we
never did.
But I remember coming to the book launch because there was the workshop. And I mean, there were two workshops, but I ended up in the one where I think there was only one other man in there. All the men came for the later one. But kind of realizing, because we don't talk about the stuff, like even the sex talk.
Yeah.
Like, I still don't know how to have that conversation because I never had that conversation, right? But one of the reasons I asked you before we started the pad run still operating is because the pad run has become that thing where even though I'm not actively kind of making a change, but like I can donate and appease my guiltiness a little bit, with initiatives like that.
And we literally just ask people to donate 10 Rand. That's it. That's all we want from you. Just a 10 Rand. 10 Rand a month. That's it. We just want to be able to buy sanitary towels. And we do get a lot of corporates that will send us sanitary towels. We're not even worried about the money. If you can send us the sanitary towels, we will take it. Because it's really important for us to make sure that girls and women have access to sanitary pads. Yeah. I mean, you need to realize that in a lot of the rural areas, because of either price or lack of product. I mean, do you know that up until a couple of years ago, do you know that sanitary towels had luxury tax on them? It was a luxury item. We had to pay luxury tax on that like you would pay on a Ferrari. A luxury tax. I never understood why it was a luxury. It's not a luxury for us. And it had luxury tax on it. So because of that, there's the price of sanitary pads and the accessibility of it. Girls were taking the old pillowcases and taking cow dung and putting it in and cutting it into strips, and they're using that. Now what happens? You put that on and it creates infections. Yeah. And that infection now can go right into your womb, and it can create a situation where you may have to have a hysterectomy at the age of 16 even, and never have the opportunity to have kids if you choose to have them, because you've now have a virus, an infection in your body that has now been caused because you've used cow dung. Girls are using newspapers. Some girls are free bleeding. And there are so many other options also. I mean, you also have the menstrual cup that you can use. You need to understand though, and I think a lot of people don't understand that with the menstrual cup, for me to use it is amazing because I have access to running water. So when I take that out, I get to wash it out under my tap. I get to wash my hands. I get to reinsert it and germ free because there's nothing on my hands that's going to touch any intimate part of my body that's going to make me sick. If you're looking at a girl that has to squat over a pit, taking out a menstrual cup, emptying it, holding onto the side, then holding it in our hands and reinserting that into a menstrual cup is great, but if you don't have access to running water, it doesn't do anything for you. So we are also looking at speaking to people about getting branded cups for the pad run, but we want to go in, and if we're going to donate in these villages or rural areas, we want to go in and actually dig boreholes. Because there's no point in doing that and not having the access, because you're creating more disease than anything else. So yeah, pads, and you have to change them every couple of hours. They're not the greatest cost-effective way, but that's why we try and provide them to women who don't have to buy them. But also we need to start, we're in 2025. We need to have access to running water no matter where you live, so that we can cut down on the amount of diseases that women are dealing with.
It's about recognizing that it is a necessity, and it's a basic necessity.
Yes.
And then looking at, like you're saying, the options available, and then looking at each environment and going, what is best for this environment, and what do we need to create around it to ensure that you can maximize, in a way, that environment.
Yes, very much so. And also, we also need to educate our sons. We need to educate them because we need to bring that statistic down in terms of the abuse statistic. We also need, I worked with someone and we were having a conversation about the pad run. And he said to me, he got married to his wife when he was 24 and she was 23. And he grew up in an Indian household with only a mom, I think no sisters. And he says he had no idea about when periods came, how long they lasted for, or any kind of that information. His wife had to educate him at 24 years old about it. And I just don't think boys should be, they should have to not have that information. And I think also the stigma of not teasing girls at school and understanding when these things happen and you bleed through and those kind of things. I think that's really important for boys to understand that happens to us. And also, yes, we have a lot of girl child programs. I really do think we need to step up our boy child programs as well, because yes, we need to concentrate on girls. And yes, there's been many over the years where girls haven't had the opportunities, but pushing one down to push the other one up is not going to solve this problem.
And also, my belief is that with some of these conversations, it needs to happen on both sides, like you're saying. There needs to be dialogue, but also, so for example, as a man, with the challenges that we have, particularly in our society, but across the world, sometimes us as men need to get together and have honest conversations with ourselves, and those aren't necessarily happening.
Yeah.
But you lay that foundation for that conversation, for that attitude, for those perspectives, with how we interact with our sons.
Yes.
And the conversations that we have with our sons, and what we show them and tell them is kind of the right way of doing things, or the right way of approaching. But you're doing that also trying to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
I always say, regardless of who you are, where you are today, we were all problematic at some stage in our lives. Like I have lists of things that I did as a teenager in my 20s where, because of, let's say, my self-awareness today,
Yeah.
I recognize that, okay, that
wasn't good. A
that,
good move.
that was bad.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an ongoing journey, but like I should thank you for giving me an outlet and forcing me to engage with it to a certain extent. But so outside of the business, outside of the pad run,
Yeah.
you're now the mother of a child that's going to tertiary. So there's an element of empty nest.
Yes, I haven't hit the empty nest yet, though. But yes,
but
definitely.
you're now shifting into a new chapter.
Yes.
Definitely. You've
Definitely.
spent the last coming on 20 years
Yes.
focused on just building a life and
Yes.
getting all the shoes that you need and enjoying what life has to offer, but with this human being to look after. Now this human being is starting to question you. And
She's been doing that for years.
We're gonna get to the stage where now she's looking after you, or wants her, she wants her space and her time. What does life look like now? Like what does your day to day, your week, your plans look like now?
I mean, I'm looking into starting another business, and I'm working on that at the moment. But I mean, I say we haven't hit that yet, purely because I think, my daughter and I, it's been the two of us for a long time, and just the two of us with our helper. So it was really just the three of us in that house. And my helper also has a daughter who is about 4 or 5 years older than Layla, and she is so clever, and she got a scholarship to in India. And if I'm correct, she's studying marine biology. And so it's like having 2 kids in tertiary. But, I love that she's out of the house. And I love that she's out of the house because I feel like, I left home at 19. I moved in by myself at 19. And it was because my parents moved back to South Africa and I stayed in England. And I just feel like she needs to learn that independence away from me. She needs to understand what the world is like, because I am such a big support system for her. Like anything she needs, I will drop anything to make sure I'm there, to make sure that she gets what she wants and that she has the support that she needs. And I think just her being by herself is something that I'm really proud of, because I know that she's Little Miss Independent, but when she needs me, she needs me. And I just, I want her to know what life is like on her own, just like I had to do. Not because I had to do it, but because she needs to do it. And she needs to understand she's been there a week now. She's had to cook for herself. And I've heard some stories. But she's not terrible at it, and also just understanding that, hey, ma'am, I'm not going to wake you up for school every day. I'm not going to wake you up to go write an exam. This is now your responsibility. You need to do these things. You need to be responsible for how you manage your budget that we give you every month. You need to be responsible for how you handle your food, your time, your study time. And I was like, if you get a boyfriend, great, but just don't make it your personality. She knows the rules of life. When she goes out, don't get locked up. If you get locked up, get dominance in jail. That's our rules at home. We make sure that she understands how life works, and she also understands that she comes from major privilege. Both her dad and I are colored. Her dad's a lot darker than I am, but my child is even lighter than the both of us. So she went to a school that was predominantly white. She has a lot of connections in a world where these people's parents are CEOs, big major corporates, or ambassadors from other countries. So we put her into a life with major privilege that both of us didn't have. And she also understands that. And, you know, I always say to her, take advantage of it, but never to the detriment of anyone else. And she understands that. She always understands that, you know, you've got to bring your people up when you go up. And, you know, really understand how life works. And also that, you know, just be above board with everything. I also like that, you know, she's very compassionate. She's a very compassionate child. And as a only child from me, her dad has a child from his second wife. She's got a gorgeous little brother. And, you know, but being an only child from me, she also understands that, you know, it really was just the two of us. And she understands that, you know, how money works. I mean, up until Layla has been doing the groceries in our house since COVID. So she does all the grocery shopping online. I taught her how to do everything, how to look for the specials. So she opens up all the different tabs for all the different retailers, and she shops for the different ones, looking for the best prices. It was the best way to teach her how to shop and use money properly. And so she's always done the grocery shopping. So even when she went to uni, it was about, look, mommy, I bought this and it was a 2-for-1 special, and I got this and da-da-da-da. And even, you know, that was just for her room. And when we were in grocery shopping, it was like, if I buy this, it's a 3-for-2. No, we can't buy this because it expires soon. So we might as well buy this one. It'll last long. And so just little things like that in life that we don't really send our kids out with was really important for me, for her to learn. And then the other things like handling money and budgeting, she is amazing at that. I mean, since she was 11, she's had these different businesses that she's always made money from. And I'm really proud of her for being this little entrepreneur. So I think she's going to be okay. But for me, I guess the empty nest will probably come. And I've decided, it's time I find my next husband. So that, I can travel with someone at least.
I hate to say this, but hasn't it been for a while? Like I've been watching you have this, I've been watching you have this semi-public conversation around your next husband.
Yeah, my next husband is coming. Don't worry, he's gonna be here soon. I think it's time now to get remarried. I mean, my ex-husband is he's divorced his third wife already. I've only gone past my starter marriage. I really think that I'm failing at this thing. So I think it's best I just get another husband right now. But he must come with all his own baggage. He must come with all his own things. But yeah, I mean, I think it's also that thing of I've always been very particular about the men around my daughter. Don't really bring, no matter how long the relationship is, I'm very wary of bringing men around my child. I've always been like that. Even if male friends have stayed over, I've always said, you can stay here, but I'm locking you in the room because you will be in the same side of the house as my child. I can't allow that. We can be the best of friends, but at the end of the day, that's my child. So I've always been very pedantic about who my child meets. And, and who comes into her life. But I think now that she's out of the house, it does make dating easier. I'm not always thinking about, okay, I can't do this because I've got to make sure I'm home for this. And so, I think I've now opened up myself to more of a life. I can be a straatsmate now. I don't mind. But I've always known that, being the present parent is going to be a part of me that I'm going to have to put on the back burner. And I will never say sacrifice because it is a choice that I've made. But I'm happy now to pursue love and another relationship or things like that because I feel like I'm more at ease because she's not at home and I don't necessarily have to introduce her to anybody. Maybe it would have been different if I'd had a boy. I honestly don't know. But I think just because I am so paranoid about having a girl child, you just are so cautious about those kind of things.
And your health journey.
Definitely.
Which has been commendable to watch. Your dedication surpasses all of ours.
I had no choice. Like, I came back. I went to my friend's wedding last year. Not last year, the year before. The end of December 2023. And, you know, I've never been a big person. And watching myself slowly get bigger and bigger was something I was like, I need to deal with it. I need to deal with it. I need to deal with it. And I'm the kind of person who says, when I need to deal with something, I deal with it. End of story. Don't like lingering things. But there are a lot of things that I do procrastinate on. And my health was something I was really procrastinating on. And not only was I picking up so much weight, but I was also just getting unhealthy, like really unhealthy. And when I came back from that holiday in Bali and I was just looking at pictures and I was like, what the hell is happening here, Farah? Like I went to go and try on clothes and I was already a size 16 and I was going into an 18. Like the 18 was fitting me and I was like, okay, this is where we stop this. This is where we cut this journey. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go and find a personal trainer, found a personal trainer. And I was like, I'm going to commit to this. And, you know, I've gone down from a size 18 to a size 12, which is a huge journey for me. But not only that, like my cholesterol was 3.9 going on 4. And now it's sitting at in the 2s. It's a big difference for somebody like me. They were about to put me on cholesterol pills. And I was like, no. And then there's one thing I hate is anything that isn't natural. So I take a lot of natural substances. So the minute the doctor wants to put me on something that's I'm like, you have a problem, Farah. And I just had to lose weight. I had to start eating better and taking care of myself because I also know that, you know, I am the primary parent and I need to be there for her. So my health journey has been something that was really for me. I needed to see that I could do it. I needed to see that I could get rid of this weight. I'm definitely not anywhere near where I want to be, but I do feel so much better. Even today, fitting into this dress, I have not worn this dress in over 2 years, I think. And the last time I did wear it, it was pushing like the seams. I'm surprised the stitching didn't split on the sides, but it was nice to be able to get back into my clothes again. It's nice to be able to run and not be out of breath. Not that I do running, because unless someone's chasing me, I'm not running. I refuse to do that. But just also, it's been such a great journey because I've been able to try out so many things, like going to gym and doing Pilates and yoga and all these other things that I would never really have tried as much. I mean, I always loved yoga, but I hike so much. And that has been such a outdoors therapy session for me. And I've absolutely loved it. And I've loved learning about the outdoors. And I'm not really an outdoorsy person. I am not a person who glamps. Hey, there's no way to plug in things. You will not find me there. So I'm very much learning new things about myself. And I really do think, you know, I even want to do Kilimanjaro in 2026. And that's something that I'm trying to train for now. And I think by her being out of the house and having had a child at the age of 25, 26, and being a mom for the last 20 years, I'm really rediscovering myself and who I am and what I like to eat for dinner. And if I want to cook for dinner tonight, because, you know, having a child in my house was like, you know, I ran a restaurant there because it's what she wanted to eat. So I think just little things about what do I like? What do I want to eat? What do I want to watch on TV? What do I want to do today? I think it's a rediscovering journey for myself now. And that's why I say I think even dating is something that I'm so open to because it's about me again. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this conversation. Please leave a review and subscribe. Check out the show notes for links to the guest, the podcast, and myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.